Okay, we're officially recording. So guys, my name's Avi. It's nice to see you all, even though I can't see any of you. It's nice to be here with you. I really appreciate you guys joining. This GMAT GRE stuff, right? This is kind of a nasty deal. So we're gonna kind of do a deep dive into what's happening here. But let me remove my camera so you guys can see everything. Gosh. Okay, so behind the curtain, what are they really testing? I used to write questions for this test and also for the GRE. So, they're playing a game on some level. And so today we're going to take a look a little bit about at some of the games that they're playing and how you can play back at them. This is not to say, and I don't want you to leave with the message that this is an easy test. And hey, I got some neat little nifty tricks from Avi, and now I can crush the test. No, but on the other hand, I also don't want you to walk away thinking, which most people do, hey, this is basically a math test and a grammar test and a test of reading complex passages. It's not that either. It's a little bit of both. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll leave some time at the end, hopefully, for questions. But I welcome you all. It's really a pleasure to be with you all today. So here's the agenda. We'll talk about my agenda in a second, but the agenda for the week. So Leland, which is the greatest company on God's green earth in terms of coaching platform, has a big week plan: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There it is. There it is. Each and every single one of these sessions is going to be as good, if not better, than what you're going to experience with me today. So take a good look here. If you want to sign up for any of these things, go to the Leland platform. I'll be at some of these. So maybe I'll see you there. This is the only one I'm leading, but I might be some of these just to check them out, because you never know what kind of good, cool little tips you can pick up. So again, welcome, workshop, final word. The final word is basically going to be an invitation for all of you to explore Leland, whether you work with me individually or not. The Leland platform is chock full of the most talented people that I've ever worked with for MBA admissions and test prep. Okay. I don't say this with any degree of exaggeration. This is the finest platform for coaching for MBA admissions and college admissions in general, as well as GMAT, GRE test prep. So explore, and you'll be in the best of hands no matter who you work with here. Okay, so meet your workshop coach. That's me. Here's a little bit about my history. I started in admissions at Haas, working in the admissions committee. And then I got into test prep with Kaplan, and I became the faculty trainer, the national faculty trainer with Kaplan Test Prep, doing GMAT, starting with GMAT, later GRE. I spent 7 years at USC, the University of Southern California, as the head of their test prep and admissions consulting in the International Academy, which is in Southern California. And for the last 15 years or so, I've been an independent coach full-time. So this is what I do full-time. This is not a side job for me. This isn't something that I'm doing part-time while I figure out my life. This is what I do full-time. Anybody who has questions on the MBA world, the business world, not the business world, the business school world, the GMAT or the GRE, if you have questions, chances are I have the answers. This is what I've been doing for the past 20 years. All right, where are you dialing from? We talked about that. Workshop. All right, so how important is this GMAT GRE? Well, that's pretty self-evident, isn't it? It's extremely important. Is it the only thing that matters? No, not by any means. If you talked to me 5 to 7, or let's say 7 to 10 years ago, and you asked me, Avi, how important is it that I get a good GMAT or GRE score? I'd tell you it's indispensable. Why? Because 7 to 10 years ago, admissions decisions were largely based on the quant factors of the application. Quant factors being your test score and your GPA. And so if you had a monster GMAT score and a monster GPA, chances were pretty good you were going to get admitted, okay? Unless you committed some cardinal sin on the application. It's no longer the case, as most of you probably well know. It's a much more holistic evaluation process nowadays for two reasons. Number one, it's gotten so competitive that the admissions committee is looking at a strong, this is especially true for the top schools, the M7s or the top 15, top 20 schools. Their applicants are so strong that they have the luxury of making a strong GMAT score the entrance fee for just getting into the second phase of evaluation, where they evaluate your essays and supplementary short answer questions, etc. So it's a long-winded way of saying things have changed. The GMAT is still important, but it's not as vital as it once was. There are people that get in to the top schools with GMAT and GRE scores that are below the average of what is advertised on the school's website. So remember, those are averages. So let's say the average at HBS is 730, using the old classic GMAT scoring. It's the GMAT focus now, and we'll talk about that. But using the classic scoring system, let's say the average is 730. Does that mean you need a 730 to get in? No, people get in with 790s, and people get in with 690s too, okay? But again, it's not the only thing that matters anymore. There's a large emphasis, as you all know, on narrative, branding, which all comes through the via essays and letters of recommendation, resume, short answer questions, etc. Why do they ask for the GMAT anyway? And is the GMAT more important than the GRE? Than the GPA? So there is a definitive answer here. This is not a, it depends. The GMAT and the GRE, with very few exceptions, are definitively favored over a high GPA score. Let me say that another way. More applicants to the top schools are admitted with a high GMAT, low GPA, than the reverse, high GPA and low GMAT, which begs the question, why? Number two on the screen. The GMAT and GRE has been shown statistically and data-wise, because the business schools track this, to be a more reliable indicator of business school success than GPA is. There it is. It's just the way it is. And so they do favor, a high test score to a high GPA. Ideally, you got both. But what does this mean for you as an applicant? Well, it means if you drop the ball a semester or two during your college career and your GPA isn't something you're terribly proud of, the GMAT and the GRE is the great equalizer, okay? It can offset or neutralize an otherwise underwhelming GPA. So keep that in mind. Don't think that because you got a 3.3 that HBS is out of the question. It's not, okay? Just smoke the GMAT, smoke the GRE, and you're back in the running. Okay. So how important, I'm going to talk both about the GMAT and the GRE today. So everything that I say generally applies to both. If there's a distinction, I'll make it, okay? Like I said, if you look at the graph here, GRE score in blue, slightly more important than undergraduate GPA in purple here. I don't know if that's purple. I'm colorblind, but whatever. Where is this from? What's this source from? Did I just slap this pie chart together? No. This is 2019 the top 50 business schools admissions committees were asked, how they apportion value to these 5 metrics, and this is what came out. Okay. So here's the test. Most of you know that both the GRE and the GMAT their exams were overhauled this past year. The GRE in September, the GMAT in March. Now, the GRE and the GMAT have been locking horns since 2012, when the GRE convinced business schools that they too should be accepted as an admissions exam for business school admissions. And then the business schools like, well, no, because the GMAT's a harder test. And so the GRE said, all right, we're going to go back to the lab and produce a harder test to compete with the GMAT, so that then the business schools can also accept the GRE. They were selling their product, right, which is the GRE test. Anyway, they went back to the lab and pitched the business schools, and the business schools in 2012 said, yep, let's do it. We now accept the GMAT and the GRE. Well, the business schools didn't do it. Harvard did it. And as Harvard goes, so goes everybody else. So everybody else followed suit. So now you can take either the GMAT or the GRE. Here's the new GRE, overhauled in 2023. It's the current version. There's one essay, 30 minutes. It's very short, 12 questions, section 1, 15 questions, section 2, and then same for verbal. That's the test, okay? Here's the GMAT. There's a data insights section. I mean, most of you already know this. I'm not going to get into great detail, because if you don't know it, you know, I can send you the slide, or you can look at this on the GMAT website, okay? It's basically data insights is a bunch of graphs, okay? And what's called data sufficiency questions. What are those? Those are very unique question types. They're actually brilliantly designed question types to ask you not if you can solve a question, but whether or not it is possible to solve a question given certain pieces of information. It's really asking you, what can you do with incomplete information? Okay, very much a business school skill when you begin to analyze cases and predict outcomes and offer recommendations or solutions, okay? Verbal section, basically analyzing arguments and reading the extremely boring passages that are designed to put you to sleep. Can you stay awake and alert enough to answer questions based on those passages? And while we will introduce today some quantitative strategies, I want you to remember and keep in mind, the verbal section too is contains questions that are very, very, very open to strategic approaches, rather than, like I said, here's a boring passage that's written in a very boring, technical, dense, overcomplicated way, and I gotta remember and understand all of it. It's called reading comprehension. If you do it right, it's called reading strategically, because half, if not more, of the passage does not need to be comprehended. Then there's math, right? Algebra, arithmetic. That sounds pretty easy, right? Arithmetic is something they introduced in like 2nd and 3rd grade. The content on the GMAT math is pretty limited in scope. There's not that much you need to know, and yet it's pretty hard. And the reason it's hard is because they test it in, I'll use a GRE word here, okay? They test it in circuitous ways, ways that are not direct, okay? So the quant, especially on the GMAT and the GRE, has so many hidden strategies that you can use. You'll see a few of them today to sidestep the traditional math approach and arrive at questions much quicker than you otherwise would using the straightforward brute force math method. Okay, so again, algebra, arithmetic, pretty straightforward junior high school and, you know, concepts, but they test it in tricky ways. The GRE is a multiple stage tests. It adapts between sections. The GMAT, if you answer a question right, it gets harder. You answer a question wrong, the next one gets easier, on and on for the rest of the test. And then depending on the pattern in which you answer the questions correct and the relative difficulty, that's how they arrive at your score. The GRE is different. Everybody sees section 1, same level of difficulty, intermediate. Depending on how you perform on section 1 will determine whether you see advanced questions on section 2, which is going to be your high scoring range, intermediate section 2, middle potential scoring range, or beginner section. Those are very easy questions, and you're in the low potential scoring range. GRE scores from 130 to 170. Average score, you can see it right here. It's about a 302, 152 quant, 150 verbal. It hovers around, 300 to 305. Scores are good for 5 years. Okay. If anybody here on the call is, let's say, a junior or a senior in college, or a year out, consider taking the test, even if you don't intend to apply in the fall. There's data on this too, statistical data. And it proves conclusively every year. So every year data is released on these standardized tests. And if you are, rubbing elbows with the GMAT and GRE insider crowd at the GMAT and ETS, like I do, I'm not sure if I'm proud of that or ashamed of it, but what they do is they send you the data each year. And each year the data is the same. For every year outside of college where people take the test, let me rephrase that. Scores decline for both the GMAT and the GRE every year after somebody graduates from college. So a year out is going to be higher than 2 years out, higher than 3 years out. Now, of course, there's exceptions, but broadly speaking, that's the case. Why? Well, I mean, as you can imagine, you're still in academic mode when you're a junior or senior in college. So your head is still in that kind of world. And every year after that, it's distance from it. So remember, if you take it at age 22 and you apply at age 26 or 27, your score is still valid, okay, for 5 years. Keep that in mind. You're only going to get busier as the years go on and you get into your career, okay? And so taking aside 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months to study for the GMAT or GRE, when you're on a case for your consulting job and you're working 75 hours a week is different than your summer vacation of your junior year or senior year, okay? What else? Okay, let's move on. Incidentally, if there's any questions, just save them for the end. I'm happy to answer them. But I am going to check the chat. We got 2 things here. Oh, Brian's from San Francisco. Welcome to you, Brian. Okay, so here's one of my favorite quotes from Alberto Einstein. Any fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. Simplicity, right? So the strategy that I've used or devised over the last 20 years for standardized tests in general, but the GMAT and GR in particular, is the 80-50 method. Now, the 80-50 method is a takeoff on the 80-20 rule. And most of you are familiar or have heard about the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle, which states that 80% of the work is done by 20% of the workforce, or 80% of the information is available from 20% of the sources, or in standardized testing, 80%, I turned it into the 80-50 method, 80% of the questions on the GMAT and the GRE can be solved knowing just 50% of the content. The other 50% of the content is used for just 20% of the questions. So if you want to capture just 80% of it, you can master 50% of the content and get an extremely high score. This is a strategic way to look at it. I'll give you a quick example. There's probability questions or combination permutation questions. That might not mean anything to people who are not math people, but questions that relate to concepts in probability or combinatorics. They're rare. You might see 0 of them. You might see 1. In rare cases, you might see 2. And they're hard, which means they take a long time to master, and they're not predictable. I've always advised my clients, unless they are in search of extremely, extremely high perfect scores, for the most part, we can leave those alone until you reach a score high enough to justify approaching those or tackling those, okay? But the first thing you got to do is get a really, really good score. And that you can use the 80-50 method and then surgically go for the great exceptional score. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by strategic questions. Take a look at this thing. So what's the difference between heavy lifting math, right? X plus Y equals Z, and if Z is greater than 0 and X must be an integer and blah, blah. Hey, it's all good stuff. I like it. A lot of you like math, okay? But take a look at this question. Let's see the difference between heavy lifting math and strategic thinking. In the annual March Madness men's basketball tournament, 64 teams play. If a team loses, it is automatically eliminated. How many games must be played until the champion is crowned? Okay, go ahead and take a minute or so to mess with that one. Yeah. You can put your answer in the chat if you want. $63, $63, $63, 6. Okay, 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1. Okay, yeah, you guys get the idea. Okay, so you're all correct. Like, okay, wait a minute. If 64 teams play, and if you lose, you're out, that means in round 1, there's 32 games, right? Hang on just a moment, guys. I'm going to close my door here. So in round 1, 32 teams play. Okay, that's 32 games. And then half of them lose, so then there's 16 games. And then half of those lose, and then there's going to be 8 games, and 4 and 2 and 1, and then you add those and you get 63. Sure, that's fine. That's the mathematical way to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And this is a sort of silly little problem, but just to demonstrate the type of thinking that the GRE and the GMAT in particular wants to encourage is nonlinear thinking. In other words, looking at a question and then asking yourself, it's not can I solve it? It's what's the easiest, most efficient way to solve it? Okay. First of all, because timing is an issue. There's really, if you're scoring high enough, there's not enough time to finish the test. And it's that way by design. It gets harder and harder and harder. Okay. Forcing you to employ more strategic approaches to questions rather than brute force math. Okay. If there's 64 teams and there's one winner, how many losers are there? Well, there's 63. And that means that 63 games would have had to been played in order for 63 losers to emerge. So we can do it that way. 63. The answer is 63. You can either do it with 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, which is a perfectly acceptable method, again, or 64 teams play. If there's one winner, there's 63 losers, therefore 63 games were played. Is it a trick question? No, it's not. It's just intended to show you, and you'll see it in a little bit, actual GMAT and GRE questions. Ask you to sort of look for similar strategies. And the strategies are not different for every question. There's patterns to them. So what I teach my students is how to detect the patterns, okay, embedded within the test, the strategies that are common to various categories of questions. Word problems, they have a certain strategy. We'll see one today, okay? So again, this is, the 80-50 method that I use, right? We talked about it's a takeoff on the 80-20 method. Take a look at this question. Now look, well, before I even get to it, I'm about to put a question on the board. Now, my math heads are going to be like licking their chops going, oh, yes, grabbing their pencil and start scribbling and figuring it out. Fine, have a ball, okay? What I'm really doing is trying to show you a different way to look at it, okay? A lot of you will be able to solve this problem. That's not the point. The point is, as they get more and more difficult and the time starts to dwindle and the heat starts picking up, can you perform at the same level? It's one thing to do math, okay? Or to analyze an argument, or to read a complex passage. It's another thing altogether to do it with a gun to your head. And that clock, that time, is the gun to your head. That's a whole different story. Stress amps up, anxiety is heightened, and usually more careless mistakes are made. You misread a question, okay? And performance is hampered. That's just the way it is for everybody. It's the human being, right? If you want to perform, you perform best when eyes aren't on you and you're relaxed. But when the heat's on and there's a gun to your head, in other words, the clock, it feels different, okay? So take a look at this question. Now, I'm going to read it, then I'm going to ask you all a question. Here we go. Okay. A paperboy working her route makes P dollars for every Q papers, that should be a she delivers. For every paper beyond Q, the paperboy makes, okay, now this is getting to be a weird question. This should be a his. A paperboy working his route makes P dollars for every paper he delivers. For every paper beyond Q, the paperboy makes P plus T dollars. If 1 week the paperboy delivers P plus Q papers, most people are already have a headache by now, but they'll keep reading as if things will get better. They never do. And the next week she delivers Q plus T papers, then how much more did the paperboy make in week 1 if P is bigger than T? Again, we went from beginning to end. Show of hands, how many people would have to read it again? Be honest. Yeah, okay. Thank you for your honesty. Alexander, Tom, Veronica, Gustavo, Sebastian. God bless you guys. Yeah, honesty. I love it. I would too. Okay. And I can get a perfect score on this test in my sleep. I still need to read this again. Okay. So, what happened here? Well, what happened is, hang on, let me. And again, some of you have, reread it and are solving it, and that's fine. But take a look. These questions are intended to confuse you and raise your anxiety. And they've studied certain questions on standardized tests, and they determined that if they take word problems and add variables to it, okay, it makes people anxious. They're taking you into this abstract world, okay? And people naturally read from beginning to end, from a paperboy working all the way to the question mark. One of the first things I talk to my clients is about never read the question from beginning to end. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to be frustrated and angry and go, okay, I got nothing out of that. Let me read it again slower this time. Maybe I'll get something out of it. Okay. Meantime, the clock is ticking. Maybe you read it slowly the second time and you picked some stuff out of it. Okay, let me read it one more time. And then maybe you start putting equations together and P plus T times Q minus blah, 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 whatever. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. Okay. But what if I gave you a different question? What if instead of this one, whoops, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, guys, because my board is malfunctioning and I have to unplug it and replug it in. So hang on just a second. Okay. Incidentally, for those of you who, it's going to be up in a second, guys, but for those of you who are considering registering for the test or have already prepared and want to register, make sure to look at times available because they do fill up pretty quickly, especially in the big cities and especially the times that you might want. You know, morning, mid-morning, late morning times are ones that are most popular and therefore fill up quickest. All right, let me do it this way. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. Here's the question that we saw. Okay. Each writer for the local newspaper is paid as follows, blah, 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 blah. Now I want to look at a different question. So take a look at this question right here. Right here. Mary, let me read it. Right here. Mary can type 6 words every 3 minutes. At this rate, how many words can she type in 2 hours? Don't solve it. I'm sure most of you can. That's not my point. Do you understand it? Well, I imagine you do. It's English and it's simple numbers. Whereas this one, it's English, sure, but it's abstract variables and it's long and it takes me into this weird world of A dollars and P stories. In a second, we're going to talk about turning this one into this one. But first, let's solve this one. Some of you have already solved it, but for those of you who haven't, let's just do it together. Mary can type 6. I mean, why can I solve it? Because I understand it. I understand what they're saying. Mary can type at this rate. So at this rate, how many words can she type in 2 hours? Okay, well, 6 words in 3 minutes. That's 2 words per minute. Okay, what do you want to know? How many in 2 hours? Oh, 2 words in a minute means how many in an hour? Multiplied by 60. How many in 2 hours? Multiplied by 2. I'm done. There's my answer. Whatever that number is. Ends up being 240, but that doesn't matter. I'm done. Fine. Easy question. The only problem is that question will not appear on the GRE. It's too easy. This one will. Mary can type X words every Y minutes. How many words can she type in Z hours? Or maybe this one will. Mary can type X over 7 words every Y over T minutes. How many words can she type in Z over 9 hours? You get the idea. This question, if I replace 6, 3, and 2, right, with X, Y, and Z, or X over 7, Y over whatever, it turns into something ugly and abstract. And a question I otherwise wouldn't have any problem answering now becomes something weird. And this is an easy one, right? We saw that there's a complex one, looks like this, okay? But we'll talk about that one in a second. Very commonly on the GMAT and GRE, they'll give you word problems with variables in the question and variables in the answers. And then if you look at the answers, they all look the same, right? They all have the 60, the X, the Y, and the Z in different orientations. One of the things I talk about is always turn this problem into this problem, okay? And we don't even need to read from beginning to end. Stop when you get to a variable, always. Mary could type X words. Stop. Let's choose an X. All right, just so you know, there's no hocus pocus here. You guys choose the X. Give me an X. First X in the chat wins. 3, thank you, Will. X equals 3. Yeah, I like to pick my numbers easy and small just to make life easy. And Y minutes, anybody? Every, okay, let's see, 3, okay, that works. Every 3 minutes, fine. How many words can she type in Z, I saw 2 hours. Tell me if you understand this question. Mary can type 3 words every 3 minutes. How many words can she type in 2 hours? Yeah, I can do that. 3 words in 3 minutes means 1 word per minute. 1 word per minute. How many in an hour? Multiplied by 60. How many in 2 hours? Multiplied by 2. 1 times 60 times 2, I'm done. My answer is 120. 120 appears here. Let me just substitute X, Y, and Z with 3, 3, and 2 and see which one equals 120. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, God, that's a lot of work. Now I got to do that. No, it's not a lot of work for 2 reasons. Number one, it's way less work than having to construct equations. This equation's not hard, but this one will be. Okay, try to construct equations. Number two, some of the answers are not even feasible. Okay, I'm looking for 120. That's the answer. Let's see B. B is Z divided by something. 2. Z is 2. Is 2 divided by anything going to be 120? No, 2 divided by something is very small. Same thing here. X times Z. 3 times 2. 6 divided by something? No, that's not going to be 120. There's one other one that we can throw away without even trying. This one, right? 3 times 3 times 2 divided by something is not going to be 120. We know it's got to be one of these two. Okay? So let's just try one of them. If it's correct, I'm done. If it's not correct, I'm still done. It must be the other answer. Okay? So let's try C. Okay. C is 60 times X times 3. And by the way, on the GRE, you have a calculator if you want. Times Z times 2 over Y over 3. Okay, so I can cancel the 3's, and I have 60 times 2, yes, which equals 120. So is there any hocus pocus here? No, any number that you choose will work. And I know this is an easy one. But remember, guys, it gets harder as you get better. And this works equally well if I said Mary can type X over 7 words every Y over T minutes. How many words can she type in Z over X hours? That's a hard question. Okay, but the same thing, it's still the Mary question, disguised with variables. Okay, so now let's go here. Can I do it with this one? This super ugly one? Each writer for the local newspaper is blah, 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 blah. Don't be like everybody else. Don't read it from here to here. You're going to get nothing out of it. There's too many layers to it. It's that way by design. When I used to write these questions for the GMAT and GRE, I wrote them with the deliberate intent of making you angry at me. Okay? So don't play into my game. Stop when you get to a variable. Each writer for the local newspaper is paid as follows. I stop. Somebody give me an A. I sound like a cheerleader. Give me an A. A. What do we got here? Elliot says 5. So does Elias. Hey, all right. We have okay, A is 5. $5. Ooh, I already like it better. I know what $5 means. That's more practical. $5 for each of the first. Give me an N. Give me an M. Okay, nobody wants to. That's fine. $5 for each of the first. I don't know. How about 3? $5 for each of the first 3 stories each month. See that comma? You know what that means? It means stop. Don't add more layers. By the time I get to the question, I will be done if I do it right. I won't have to read it again. Everybody else will read from here to here, be angry, and then have to read it again. By the time I get to the question, if I'm doing it right, I should be done. Okay? So, $3 for each of the first 5 stories each month. How much is that? Oh, that's pretty easy. That's $3 for each of the first 5 stories. That's $15. Okay, so that's $15 for the first 5 stories. What am I doing here, guys? Well, simple. I'm turning something abstract into something I know, I can understand. Now I can keep going. And A plus B, I don't have a B. Stop and give myself a B. Let's say B is 4. And A plus B, okay, that's 5 plus 4. Okay, and $9 for each story thereafter. Okay, got it. $15 for the first 5 stories, and 5 plus 4, $9 for each story thereafter, and $9 for each additional story. At least I understand what's going on. $15 for the first 5 stories, $9 for each additional story. I never have to read this again. Most people read these 3 or 4 times. I'm done with all of this, where A is greater than B. I never have to read it again because it's here. $15 for the first 5 stories, $9 for each additional story. Now, it doesn't matter what you ask me. I'm going to be able to figure it out because I already have all the pieces here. And I can predict already what you're going to ask me because all the GMAT questions and the GRE questions are predictable. The word problems are info piece 1, then later in the story, info piece 2, and then last part of the story is the question. And if you read info piece 1, then info piece 2, then the question, you'll get nowhere except a headache because it sounds like this. Each writer for the local newspaper is paid as follows: $A for each of the first N stories each month, and A plus B for each story thereafter, where A is greater than B. How many more dollars will the writer who submits N plus A? You get the idea. Okay. Now, when I get to the question, it sounds a little different. Watch. How many more dollars will a writer who submits, I don't have any N's, A's, and B's anymore. I have 5s, 3s, and 4s. That I understand. How many more dollars will a writer who submits N plus A? That's 8 stories. Okay, so 8 stories. How much more does he make? Then a writer who submits, let's see, N plus B, that's 3 plus 4, versus 7 stories. Let's see. Can I find out how much more the guy who does 8 stories makes than 7 stories? Of course I can. It's all here. You make 15 for the first 5. Okay. $15. $15. Plus what? I forget. Good thing I labeled. Plus $9 for each additional. Well, if it's 15 for the first 5, then there's 3 additional stories because he's making 8. So it's 9 times 3. Here there's 2 additional stories. 9 times 2. So we get what? 15 plus 18. Last I checked, that it's 33. 15 plus 9 times 3, 27. Last I checked, that's 42. The question is, how many more dollars will this guy make than this guy? 42 minus 33 is 9. My answer is 9. Let me find 9. Plug it into here, see if you get 9. Plug it into here, see if you get 9. Plug it into here, see if you get 9. Shouldn't be too hard. Why? Because I used nice, easy whole numbers, 5s, 3s, and 4s. There's 2 more answers, of course. There's always 5. Plug it into D, plug it into E. Okay, so let's see. Let's start with B. That looks easy. A minus B. 5 minus 3, is that 9? No. How about A squared minus B squared? 5 squared, 25, minus B squared, minus 16. 5 squared minus 4 squared. Yes, that's 9. There it is. If not, I could try this one, or D and E. What did I accomplish here? 3 things. Number 1, reduce anxiety. I know this is a mess here. I didn't have much space, but number 1, reduce anxiety. I turned this from this garbage into the following. Each writer for the local newspaper is paid as follows: $5 for each of the first 3 stories each month, and $8 for each story thereafter. How many more dollars will a writer who submits 8 stories than a writer who submits 7 stories? If I showed up at your work and slapped this question on your desk, but this was a 5, and this was a 3, and this was an 8, and this was a 7, or whatever it is, and this was a 5, I guarantee you most of you could do it, if not all of you. It's not a hard question, but when you turn it into variables, it becomes abstract. Okay, So we're turning this back into the Mary question. Now, this is just one strategy of many that the GMAT and GRE contains, but just to give you an idea, okay, of what's happening here. Let's go back here. And it's not hocus pocus, but there's often question types where you don't even need to put pencil to paper, because look, the GRE and the GMAT, they want to reward strategic thinkers, shortcuts. This is the one place where shortcuts are rewarded, one of few places. Ordinarily in life, it's not. Why? Because a shortcut on a standardized test involves strategic thinking, and business schools want to reward strategic thinking. So they've hired the publishers of the GMAT and GRE to write questions that reward strategic thinking and punish, sort of just brute force, time-consuming ways to solve problems, because they want efficient leaders who solve problems efficiently. Take a look at this question. This is a long one. I'm going to read it and show you that this one doesn't require pencil to even meet paper. And again, I'm not trying to, turn this into a hocus pocus lesson, guys. Some of the questions on the GMAT and GRE will require some difficult processes, okay? Which is why it's so critical for the ones that you can do strategically to do them strategically. So it opens you up for the time required to do some of the other ones, okay? I'm going to read this. Ready? Here we go. Sue owns a construction company, and it takes 8 of her employees 6 months to construct 3 houses. Ellen owns a different construction company, and it takes 8 of her employees half the time to construct the same number of houses. If Sue and Ellen combine their companies to form Sue Ellen Construction, this question is no longer in the GRE. It used to be. I wrote it many, many years ago. Then how long would it take a combined workforce consisting of 8 of Sue's employees and 8 of Ellen's employees to construct 3 houses? And there's your answers, okay? This used to be when there's multiple correct answers. Okay, well, that's a lot, right? But one of the things I teach my students is take a look at the answer choices. Oftentimes, you'll be rewarded for noticing something in the answer choices. Look at the first line of the question, okay? It takes 8 of our employees 6 months, okay? Next line. Ellen, her company, only takes half the time, takes 3 months. So Ellen alone, her company alone, can do this work in 3 months. And their question is, how long does it take both of their companies working together? Well, if it takes Ellen alone 3 months, then if they work together, will it take equal to 3 months, more than 3 months, or less than 3 months? There's only one potential correct answer, right? If Ellen alone can do it in 3 months, and then she joins forces with Sue's company, of course it's going to take less than 3 months. The only viable answer is 2 in this case, okay? Can all the questions on the GMAT and GRE be solved like this? No. Can all the questions on the GMAT or GRE be solved using this strategy? No. But there are many, many more strategies that you can employ to make this test far more doable than one that requires you to relearn 4 years of high school math that most people don't care to revisit because they're too busy with their jobs. So that's the approach I take to these standardized tests. It's the 80-50 approach, okay, to standardized tests. It's not, let's go and buy a bunch of algebra and geometry and arithmetic books and fractions and percents from Amazon and revisit the 4 years of high school math that we forgot. There's part of that. But if it's all you're doing, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle that can save you a ton of time and energy, okay? So I'm going to wrap up here in a second. By the way, the verbal has a lot of strategies too. It's just a 1-hour session, so we don't have time for that. But Alberto Einstein again, remember, make things as simple as possible, but never simple. That's if you look at Twainstein model. Twainstein is the name of the company that I founded for admissions consulting and test prep. And the reason is because It contains two of my favorite, historical intellectuals of all time, Einstein and Mark Twain. Twain for, his literary genius, and Einstein for his contributions to math and science. So Twainstein. Because every standardized test contains a verbal, Twain, and a math, Einstein, component. Not only that, but most of you heard of poets and quants, right? Business schools are looking for part poet, part quant, part Twain, part Einstein, okay? Okay, final word. Thank you for joining. I really do appreciate it. If you guys want to talk one-on-one, you're welcome to sign up for a quick 15-minute intro session. Whether you work with me or not, at least I'll get the chance to say hello and offer you some little tidbits that probably weren't provided here in this session. If we do work together, there's a 5% off coaching code there, the QRC, QRS, whatever it's called, code. I'll take just a few questions before we wrap up, if there are any. I don't see any. Okay, Gustavo says, concern that I have if I pick numbers, I can't be sure my answer applies for all possible combination numbers. Should I just forget about that possibility? That's something that you can guard against, Gustavo, but I don't have time to kind of show you here. Thank you. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, Esther. Can we go back to the reading trick so I can study? Diego, reading tricks. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Diego. Would there ever be a question like the construction one where it wouldn't be less than 3 months because of some outside concept like procurement? No, Will. There's nothing. The rule for the GMAT, just so you guys know, the GMAT and GRE, no outside knowledge of any subject other than basic arithmetic and English is required to solve any of the questions. Not simple economic concepts, nothing, no concepts of finance or anything else. For the GRE scoring, says Elliot, would it be better to do great in the first section, mediocre in the hard section, or average? You're trying to game the system, Elliot, and I hear these questions all the time. Should I focus my time on front loading the beginning questions and at the expense of the last batch of questions? Should I this, should I that? You cannot game the scoring algorithm of the GMAT. They are way smarter than you. They are way smarter than me. These are diabolical geniuses that cannot be outsmarted, okay? The scoring algorithm will take everything into account by the end of your test. You cannot game it. You can't game the timing. You can't game strategic question selection. Is there strategies for timing and strategic question selection? Yes, but it's not as crude as, hey, let me spend all my time on the first section so that I can get into the advanced section, then I don't have to score as high. No. Yeah, you're welcome, Diego. My pleasure. Thank you for coming. Do I recommend Target Test Prep, GMAT Diagnostic, or is it generally better to take? No, the official one's better, Ashley. Does it give you a leg up if you submit both GMAT? Ooh, that's a good question from Elsa. So before you guys go, Elsa's got a good question. Does it give you a leg up if you submit both GRE and GMAT? No, no. If you want to take both of them, fine. Just score big on any one of them. That's all they care about. If you score if you get decent scores on both, it's the same as if you submitted a decent score on one. They prefer that if you just submit one score. If you do great on both, yeah, submit both. Is there harm in just doing, do schools frown on multiple attempts? Another great question. So let me just repeat, and then we'll probably have to sign off here. Pat asks, do schools frown on taking tests multiple times? Get this, last stat of the day. Average number of times that applicants take the GMAT or the GRE before they're admitted. This includes for the M7 schools, the big names, Harvard, Wharton, okay, Stanford, and other top 25 schools. Take a guess. The national average. What is it? Average number of times people take these are admitted students. Admitted students. Diego says 8. Ashley's right on the money, 3 or 4. It's about 3.8. 3.8 something's the national average. 4 times. Is there any shame in taking the test multiple times? No, there absolutely isn't. Everybody does. National average is 3.8. My students, 1.7. So do all my students hit it the first time? No, but we're crushing the national average. God bless you guys. I appreciate you coming. And if you have any more questions, just reach out to me on Leland. You can't go wrong with anybody on that platform. They're all studs. God bless. Take care.